You're listening to the Dr. Con and Coach Joe Show.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Dr. Con and Coach Joe Show. I am Dr. Con.
And I am Coach Joe. And today's episode, we're going to be talking about concussions, how to identify them, proper management of them, and what CTE is. So before we discuss that, let's give a brief background of who we are. Dr. Khan, you want to go first?
Sure. I am a foot and ankle surgeon based here in Michigan. I did my postgraduate training at Bellevue Hospital in New York City, and now I'm here as a practicing attending.
And what hospitals are you at?
I'm at the My Michigan and McLaren hospitals in mid-Michigan.
And I am Coach Joe. I have been a coach and personal trainer in the Metro Detroit area for over 20 years. I am certified as a performance enhancement specialist, a sports nutrition specialist, and youth exercise specialist. And I used to own the first indoor baseball softball training facility in Metro Detroit for over 5 years. I was there for 16. We were there total for 25. So during that time, I trained literally thousands of kids and adults in sports, primarily baseball, but other sports as well. So the basis of this show is going to be trying to combine what you do as a surgeon, experience in other parts of the medical field, and with what I know in terms of the sports industry and how they're pretty much similar to one another. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between the two.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, do you want to get started on what a concussion is from your...
Yeah, well, why don't you define it, and I'm going to jump in.
Okay, so a concussion is a mild form of a traumatic brain injury or a TBI. It can be caused by a straight strike or bump to the head or to the upper torso, causing your brain to move inside your skull. You don't necessarily have any symptoms that can be seen on imaging necessarily. So if you went to like the hospital and you got a CT or an MRI, you necessarily wouldn't see any bleeds, but that doesn't mean that you don't have a concussion.
Right. And I think a lot of people don't understand that you don't have to have a direct hit to the head. So it could be like getting into a car accident or playing football and getting tackled really hard. Anything that jumbles the brain inside the skull.
Yeah, essentially. It's basically your brain hitting the inside of your skull, causing almost, a mild traumatic brain injury, like we said before.
Causes the brain cells to stretch and tear. And if you don't take care of it, you're more susceptible to having a second concussion or third or fourth.
Yeah, people do have repeated, or that are in sports like football or in like any sort of contact sports, do get repeated head trauma or repeated concussions, which can lead to CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy.
So in the coaching world, my job was to identify the symptoms, not diagnose a concussion, because that we're not medical experts. So that's your field. And we'll get into symptoms in a minute here. But you mentioned about concussions not being able to see them on a X-ray or a CT scan.
Yeah, that's right. So, oftentimes whenever somebody has like a head injury, especially if they lose consciousness, if you ever get hit in the head, you lose consciousness, you should 100% go to the hospital. That's without a question. But even if you don't lose consciousness, you can have certain injuries like a subdural hematoma or an epidural hematoma where you're having a bleed inside the brain. So with the subdural hematoma, you're getting a venous bleed under the dura, which is a tough lining outside the brain, and it covers the entirety of your brain. And once the buildup of blood starts to push up against this barrier, you're going to have the brain being compressed, which obviously can lead to dangerous situations. An epidural hematoma is an arterial bleed outside the dura. So kind of the same concept, your brain's kind of being compressed because of the blood that's being flowed in, but it's a bit worse because it's an arterial bleed versus a venous bleed. But when we're doing a CT, we're kind of looking for that sort of, and you'll see sort of like an indentation of the brain when you're looking at the CT.
So I think that's important for parents, if your kid may or may not have one, is to not think that you don't have your kid doesn't have a concussion or whoever, just because it does.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you and I both have had concussions, and we can talk about that a little bit later and what our symptoms were and
Oh yeah,
how
I
that
got
came about.
I got a good one.
Yeah, I think
All
yours
right.
much more interesting than mine. I also don't remember mine as much.
It's surprising I remember it in the detail that I do. I know it was like that. It was a concussion.
Yeah, no, same. And you might get so for symptoms wise, as you know, like I said, you're not going to see it on imaging, but you can recognize some of the symptoms. You might get too sleepy or not sleepy enough. You may have asymmetrical pupil dilation, headaches. You may be confused, not necessarily knowing where you are, what your name is.
And you don't have to black out.
Yeah,
You know, I think
exactly. Yeah.
a lot of people think, growing up, I was always a boxing fan and an
Mhm.
MMA fan. So
Yeah.
it's pretty obvious when somebody gets knocked out.
Yeah.
That's a concussion, but you don't
Yeah.
have to. The whole what is it? Seeing stars.
Yeah. No, you a lot of times.
You don't have to be seeing stars to have it.
No, for sure. Especially like when you see these boxers or MMA fighters when they get knocked down or when their knees kind of give out. You'll see them kind of like getting wobbly, and
Right.
it usually ends pretty quickly after that, just because I mean your whole body's kind of trying to shut down essentially.
Losing your balance is one of the symptoms, and that's one
Yeah.
of the signs that
Mm.
coaches like myself are supposed to identify. So let's kind of jump into what the symptoms are here. So let me start with the observed
Yeah.
symptoms, because I should probably mention that most of my information comes from two sources. As a coach, you have to go through training. Whether you
Yeah.
coach high school, college, professional, whatever it is. I'm Right now, I'm even coaching my nephew's 12U baseball team.
Nice.
I got dragged into that, and you have to go through a concussion protocol. You have to take a test. So
Yeah.
my information comes from two sources primarily: the National
Mhm.
Federation of State High School
Mhm.
Associations,
Mhm.
long-winded. It stands for NFHS, and the other one is
Okay.
Sports Medicine Advisory Committee, also known as SMAC.
Which to me is really funny because it's just like smacked upside the head. You
That's
get a
why
concussion.
the best names are the ones that are easy to remember. So,
That's true. Yeah, good acronyms.
so that's where I'm getting my information from here, and
Sure.
plus, my 20 plus years of experience. And so
Yeah.
when you are observing signs of concussion, you're looking for somebody who's dazed, stunned, or confused appearance, forgetting things, clumsy movement, bad
Mhm.
balance, slow to respond to questions, mood or behavioral or personality changes.
Yeah.
Uh, Luckily, I've never experienced a player,
Mhm.
that surprising to say this after 20 plus years of coaching, but
Mhm.
I've never had a player really have an obvious concussion.
Yeah, I mean, that's great.
But you always, if you're coaching like high school,
Mm.
you have an athletic trainer nearby
Yeah.
usually. And if they're not nearby, you can call them on your cell phone.
Yeah.
If you suspect somebody might
Mhm.
have a concussion, the old saying is, when in doubt, sit them out. So that's what I would do anyway. So
Yeah.
I may have had kids with concussions. I just didn't know because I didn't take the chance.
Yeah. No,
But
I mean,
I'd have the athletic trainer, the medical professional, check them out, and when they give
mhm.
me the thumbs up,
Yeah.
okay, you're back in. If they say no, then you're
Mhm.
out for the rest of the day. No questions asked.
And so I know you said you haven't had anybody who's actually had a concussion or was diagnosed with a concussion while they were playing.
That I know of.
Okay, so they were never officially diagnosed necessarily by the trainer or anybody
I
else.
never had a medical professional tell me sit this person out.
Um, got it. So yeah, what I was trying to kind of get at is like how long, if they did have a concussion, um, would you have them sit out? And typically, for personally, I would say 48 to 72 hours at least of observation, and probably give it a couple of weeks before they're back into whatever sports they're playing. Especially if it's a more contact sport, I'd maybe give it a little bit longer if it's like football, boxing, UFC, whatever. So I mean that's my personal view on it at least.
Yeah, I will get into management in a little bit, but typically, I mean, it's 24 to 48 hours without doing anything.
Yeah.
That's just playing it safe.
Yeah,
Um,
definitely. And I think that's one of the reasons why there's a whole don't fall asleep if you have a concussion. And that's mostly because they can't monitor you for the symptoms when you have a concussion and you're going to sleep. So if someone does fall asleep for concussion, you should wake them up after every couple of hours just to make sure that they're doing okay and they're not having those symptoms.
and then when you talk to it doesn't have to be an athlete, it could be just any individual, but when you talk to them,
Hmm.
they'll tell you things like they have a headache or neck pain, nausea, dizziness, So it's important to communicate with the person too. They'll let you know what their symptoms are.
Sure.
And again, if you're a coach out there, your job is not to diagnose. You're not a medical professional. Your job is to identify. They'll be the one to tell you.
So do all high school teams or like school teams have an athletic trainer now?
They should.
But they don't.
Well, there's a lot of small high schools out there that may not be able to afford it.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm a big believer that every high school should have a strength and conditioning coach, because a lot of even middle schools have a weight room.
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
Right.
I think ours did maybe.
But there's nobody in there to show the kids how to actually live properly.
Yeah, I mean,
So it comes down to the athletic department, their finances.
yeah, the school district probably itself.
That's where the kids. Yeah, I mean
Mhm.
that's where, when it comes down to the kids, the parents have to be smart.
Yeah, I think.
If I had a kid at a small school and they didn't have an athletic trainer that was going
Mhm.
around at the games, I want to know who's coaching my kid.
Yeah,
What's their experience level?
yeah, I
And
think.
we'll probably talk about that in a different episode.
Yeah, we can dive deeper into what we look for.
The level of experience of the coach does
Mhm.
matter in the safety of the kid.
Yeah.
So I also wanted to ask you, I mean, I'm going to get into
Mhm.
my own personal story of how I
Yeah.
know I
Mhm.
had a concussion.
Yeah.
But in your opinion, over the past, let's say, like 2 decades, how has checking for concussions changed?
Yeah, so that's a good question. Like I said, the imaging doesn't really show a concussion, but the imaging has come a long way. Even though we had MRI, CT 20 some years ago, now the visualization is so much better. You can see everything, you can diagnose it a little bit better. But with a concussion, you're not necessarily going to see it on a CT and MRI, but you are looking for those symptoms, right? You're looking for confusion, asymmetrical pupil dilation, nausea, vomiting. Those things are kind of the same, and hasn't changed a whole lot. As far as the thinking goes on what you should be doing, of course, the monitoring 48 to 72 hours, that's about the same. So in that regard, not much has changed.
Well, and I'm going to talk about what happened to me. Well, this is over 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So back then we didn't check for concussions.
Oh, really?
Not at least where I'm from.
Yeah. Well, we're from the same area.
True, but
I
concussions
know.
wasn't something.
Yeah, no, I don't think they did that at our school.
No. So I was up. This was when I was in high school, and I was up in the balcony in the gymnasium, just taking batting practice before the start of a game. And I was the pitcher of that game too. So
Oh, yeah.
so taking batting practice, and the kid that was putting the ball in the machine didn't check the screw on the side of the machine to make sure that it was, you got to tighten it, right?
Yeah.
Because if you don't, the wheel is going to go left or right.
And it's those two things that are kind of spinning like this, or kind of like.
Right. It's a jugs machine.
Okay, yeah.
So it's two rubber wheels, but they're not up and down. They were side to side,
Oh.
like this.
So
So anyway,
so the jugs were too jiggly, is what you're saying.
right. It was aimed at me. And this is real baseballs. This wasn't like the hard rubber with the dimples. This is a real baseball with the laces. I'm working on my bunting, because I was just a thing I used to do. Like the first 2 or 3 pitches, I would drop a bunt down and work on my bunting.
Yeah.
So anyway, the ball's coming at my face, and it's probably coming at like 80 plus.
Holy shit!
Hour.
That's like professional level.
It's good high school level.
Oh yeah.
And anyway, I tried to get my bat up to block the ball, to protect my face, and I made it worse. I deflected the ball. It hit me, and I wear glass. I wear glasses, so it hit me in the bridge and here. So the impact caused my glasses to go into my face.
You said it was kind of embedded, right? Like in your.
Yeah. I got, I might have it with the wrong cheek. I don't know. See, it was a concussion. I remember. But anyway, I took a knee after the impact. So I was feeling the symptoms. I was dizzy, probably no balance. Thought I was going to throw up. And, I knew my glasses were broke, right?
Yeah.
But half of them were stuck in my face, so I pulled the lens and the bridge out of my face.
Like the frame and everything came out. Man, I'm sure it's a very vascular area, your face.
And not a lot of protection.
Yeah.
I walked down the stairs to the boys' locker room, and we had a sink with a mirror. So I go to the mirror, my coach sees me and goes, "What the fuck just happened?" Because he's like, he should have been there. Honestly, I mean, he wasn't.
So they weren't like, was there anybody watching you doing this?
No, I was up there with just a teammate. I mean, a coach can't be everywhere at once, right?
Hmm.
So I'm not blaming him for that, um, but he didn't know anything about concussions either. He identified the
Hmm.
fact that I had all the symptoms. Long story short, I went to my truck out in the
Hmm.
parking lot to get my backup glasses,
Yeah.
which were like the size of goggles back then.
I know. I envisioned you as like George Costanza with his goggles, like prescription goggles.
Huge, even
Yeah.
bigger than those. I put them on and I go out and
Hmm.
I go out there and pitch. I played the game,
Nice.
so I pitched with a concussion. I know it's
That's
a
yeah. That's pretty crazy. How was your pitching? Were you kind of like?
it wasn't my best game.
I mean, I would imagine not.
I think I went only like 3 or 4 innings, and I'm like, I'm done.
Uh,
That was just too much pain.
it'd be impressive if it made you better, kind of like a Spider-Man type of
No,
situation. Where
it's
you
like
get hit in the face.
back then we did not know how to identify or what do you
Yeah.
coaches didn't have to take online concussion
Oh,
protocol
I don't
tests
think there
back
were.
then.
I don't think there were online tests back then.
Was there even online?
I think we had dial-up at that time. For the young people listening, that was a very slow uh, internet
Oh, yeah.
connection.
Dial up? God, yeah.
You couldn't you couldn't pick up the phone. Nobody could be on the phone.
I don't think I even used the internet till I was like 16.
Yeah, well, we got it like when I was 12 or 13, I think, but we didn't have any high-speed internet until like
I'm,
2004, maybe, when I was like finishing up high school.
I'm old school. I didn't even have my first cell phone until I was like 20.
I remember. I think I was there when you got it.
Well, the reason I got it was my car broke down.
Yeah, I remember. This was like your Civic, right?
Yeah, I was driving a Honda Civic.
That's right.
And,
Yeah.
I don't know, the engine died or whatever.
Oh.
Middle of the winter time, and I didn't have a cell phone, so I'm going around campus asking
Yeah.
for change.
This
So I
one,
could-
they still had payphones back then.
right, yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
So I was like basically a homeless person asking for quarters.
I mean, to be fair, they were pretty much all homeless people when they're living at college. They're not.
Yeah.
They're not. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're probably doing drugs. You're not sleeping at home.
That's
You're,
another story. That's a
you're-
different story.
you're probably babbling about some theoretical shit no one cares about.
Yeah.
Well, obviously, like we had mentioned before, you want to make sure you're resting at least for a good 48 hours, if not 72 hours. That means taking time off from school, just kind of being home, hopefully someone who can watch you, probably a grown up.
How long should you be? How long should you be out of school or work or out of sports?
I would say, if you've had a concussion, at least 2 days. I wouldn't, if you're an older person, like old enough to drive, I wouldn't be driving for that amount of time. Like you mentioned, you can get dizzy spells, nausea, vomiting. You don't want to be driving when you're doing that. That could obviously cause worse situations. Other than that, there's more of an emphasis on to kind of slowly getting back into your activities. And then long-term management can even be like rehab, like neurological rehab, so where they have you doing certain like puzzles, brain activities to kind of get your cognitive level back up, because it does kind of affect all that function in your brain, even in the long term.
Does the age of the person matter?
Yeah, I would say so. Where our brains are very plastic, meaning that they can kind of bounce back from a lot. I forgot the name of the reporter. He was in Iraq and he got hit with shrapnel in the head. I don't know if you know who I'm talking about.
Yeah, I forget his name, but I do remember.
Yeah, and he lost like a good, I think, portion of his brain, but you can see like he's back to normal. And or after a stroke, if you've known anyone who's kind of, they get weaker on one side and then eventually their speech may have been slurred originally, but now it's starting to get better. And that's also because different parts of the brain take over. So our brains are very plastic, but they're better at it when they're younger, obviously. So no surprise there. Being younger is better when it comes to anything bodily related.
Oh, that's
Almost.
true.
Almost.
Well,
almost everything.
it depends on how old you're talking.
True, I guess.
So what is CTE? What does it stand for? What is it?
Yeah, so CTE is chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and it happens after repeated concussions, right? So like we talked about contact sports, football is obviously a big sports that's tied in with CTE, and I think it's kind of gotten famous from all the players that have had CTE or have been diagnosed with CTE after playing in those type of sports. BJ Penn, I know you and I had talked about that before. He kind of recently started displaying signs of CTE versus I forgot the name of the syndrome, but essentially he thinks that people around him, his family members and friends, are being replaced by imposters. I don't think, yeah, I don't mean to laugh. It's not a funny situation, but I don't know if he's ever had any sort of mental issues before, like schizophrenia, because it doesn't necessarily set in at that age. Usually you'll see symptoms in your late teens, early 20s, so I don't think that's what that is. And given how many times he's probably had blows to the head, I think that's probably a good contender for CTE.
Yeah, and you never know it's CT right away. I mean, you can't diagnose that until after they're gone,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah, I mean, they have to do like
So
an autopsy and
the behavior could be any number of mental illnesses.
yeah, exactly. Again, it's that kind of a diagnosis of exclusion. So, you have to kind of rule out everything else out before you can say like, oh, it's probably CTE. Given the fact that they've had so much like head trauma, I think that would be, a good differential diagnosis to kind of have in your list.
So, in your experience, how many kids do you, not just kids, just anybody,
Mhm.
have you dealt with people that have had concussions or?
Certainly. As I mentioned on the top of the show, my specialty is foot and ankle surgery, but as part of my residential training, I had to do a lot of rotations through emergency rooms, internal medicine, and those are like the places that you're really seeing head trauma, especially like in the emergency room. I was lucky enough to work in a level 1 trauma center. So for better or for worse, level 1 trauma meaning that it's the highest trauma level. Certain
And you were lucky.
Lucky in the sense you get to see a lot of stuff, not the
Uh-huh.
fact that I was getting called at 3 in the morning to come take sutures out of somebody or whatever. But you do get that experience, and that was something that we saw a lot of, especially in New York City. We're having people who were constantly, and I don't know if you've seen New York City recently, if you've been there recently. There's a lot of e-bikes around there now, especially for delivery. In Michigan, like we have Uber Eats, DoorDash, and people are driving in cars mostly. But in New York City, the best way to get around for them is through electric bikes. And what they do is they'll not necessarily follow the rules of the road because those things go like 25, 30 miles an hour, but they're acting like they're bikes. So they're or pedestrians. So they're flying through red lights oftentimes. They're kind of cutting it in through traffic. And eventually, there's accidents, and those accidents will end up causing a lot of head injury because, you have like a 150 pound bike versus like a 5,000 pound car. That's not going to end well for anybody, especially if no one's wearing a helmet. So we did see a lot of that, a lot of multi-trauma people coming in. And towards the end of my residency, there were new trends, I don't know, what come on TikTok where people were subway surfing. So a lot of these were kids. They would get on top of the subways and like try to ride them and film themselves for TikTok or whatever. And obviously, eventually they would get hit or fall off the tracks, and that would cause multiple traumas. So a lot of pediatrics with like broken necks and backs and stuff like that. It's insane stuff, but you see a lot of that stuff in the city.
Well, not just in the city.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm sure you see everywhere else, but New York City particularly, you see a lot of head trauma and maybe a lot of untreated head trauma if you've been there.
Did you ever have any awkward conversations or any situations where you felt like I need to get the hell out of here because
All the time. Yeah, I mean, people would come swinging at you sometimes. This is a public hospital, so we get like all the crazies essentially. If you've ever watched the show New Amsterdam, it's based off of Bellevue or Law and Order. They go to Bellevue a lot because one of the floors is for Rikers. So we would often have patients from Rikers coming in with head trauma, obviously, if they've gotten into some sort of altercation, fights that happen. We would also get a lot of people that were coming off of drugs. So there were they were metabolizing. Essentially, when they're coming in, they may be coming off meth, cocaine, some sort of like high like that. And they tend to be a little bit argumentative, to say the least. They tend to not really listen to you. They'll try to pull out their IV. So oftentimes it would kind of get somewhat confrontational, but luckily enough, knowing where we were, they had a lot of security around there. One time, I will tell you, I think this guy was probably 6'4", 6'5", huge guy, and he starts trying to fight everybody. And I think he punched one of the doctors, and the person that they sent was not, I'm sure she was a great security person, but she was probably less than 5 foot tall. And I was like, what is this? So like me and a bunch of other residents had to kind of like go in and help stop this person from swinging wildly because I don't think she would have done much except gotten hurt in that situation.
So you're saying doctors should be armed with like tasers?
Yeah, no, just like teachers, we should all have guns.
God, that's a great idea.
Doctors with guns.
Hey, maybe coaches too.
Well, I mean,
some of the parents that you deal with, man.
I mean, yeah, nothing motivates you like hearing that shotgun cocked. They're like, oh, I better start running faster.
Well, the worst thing is when you have to act, intervene between two adults that are supposed to be acting like an adult, like an umpire or
Yeah.
the referee and a parent, and it's just crazy stuff.
I'm sure.
And the worst part is the kids are like 9, 10 years old.
Yeah, which that always gets me. Like whenever you see that parents arguing with coaches or refs,
Your kid's not going to be a professional
Exactly,
athlete
yeah.
at 9, 10 years old.
Yeah, like he's in 4th grade. He's not A-Rod or whoever, but he's no Bobby Bonilla. Let's put it that way.
At least you know 2 baseball players.
Yeah.
That's good. That's
All right. Yeah. Well, was it Ken Phelps? Was it Ken Phelps? Was one of them? For
Phelps.
what am I thinking of? Ken, they traded Jay Buhner for this guy. This is like in the 90s. I'm talking about like George Steinbrenner era. It's like why people kept on saying Ken Phelps, Ken Phelps.
I don't know what you're talking.
All right. Daryl Strawberry. There you go. There's another one. Or Ken Griffey Jr.
Hey, this is the 21st century, so you might want to update your references there.
My sports references never go past the 90s. That's it. Like that's where I peaked.
Okay. Is there anything else you want to discuss here about the concussions and CT? I think we covered everything that we're.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we touched on everything. I'll tell you briefly my own story, and I think I mentioned this before. I know I had a concussion because I literally did get knocked out, and this is because I was being a kid. I was running around. My grandmother was we're going from my house to my grandmother's house, and it was a walking distance, but it was like January, December, it was snowy. And I was running ahead of her, and of course there was a patch of black ice. I slipped, I fall, I hit the back of my head, and I blacked out for a while. I don't know how long. And then my grandmother's like, oh, just get up, you're fine. And then I went over to her house, and she was like, oh, just go to sleep, you'll be fine. Because I was already getting kind of sleepy at that point. So I turned out okay, but probably not the best call on her part.
So this is why you don't run.
Exactly. I choose not to run.
I can't picture you running.
No, I'm not sure if I can run with my knees, to be quite honest.
My God, shut up! You're younger than me.
About like 4 months, I think. But yes, I'm still 38. So
well, lucky. All right. So I think that's going to be the end of this episode about concussions, CT, how to identify concussions, and for management of them.
Mm-hmm.
Bottom line is, if you're a coach or a parent out there, be responsible, identify what a concussion looks like, and when in doubt, sit them out if they're an athlete.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be playing sports, okay? Just do the smart thing.
I just wanted to add that if you'd like, you can email us at TheDocAndCoach@gmail.com if you have any questions or topics or suggestions that you'd like us to talk about. And just a quick disclaimer, this show's more for educational entertainment purposes. And if you have some sort of medical issues, I would encourage you to seek out medical attention in your area.
It's our opinions based on our experience.
Essentially, yes.
We're not diagnosing anything.
Yeah, we're just giving our opinions. And yeah, that's it. You can catch us on TikTok at TheDocAndCoach or at the TikTok FootDoc on TikTok.
2 different TikTok.
Yeah, well, one's for the show, one's for me separately.
I know you like your TikTok. You like to dance.
That's what I'm working towards my retirement.
I thought you were too old. You can't run. How can you dance?
I just shake it a little bit. That's it.
Good God. I don't need that visual.
I'll save that one for OnlyFans.
My God. All right. Time to sign off, I think.
All right. I will talk to you guys later. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for listening.